Good afternoon to all. On the date of 13th March, I am going to present on my presentation topic critical analysis of Robert Frost poem The Road Not Taken. This is my personal information. Wants to ponder about the poet, about the poem, analysis of the poem, conclusion and references. About the poet, Robert Frost was born 1874 in San Francisco in California and died in 1963. In full name, Robert Lee Frost was an American poet who was much admired for his depictions of the rural life of New England and his command of American colloquial speech and his realistic verse portraying ordinary people in everyday situations. Frost is found profound ironist, a creator of metaphor who paradoxically teaches that the real world may be preferable to imaginative creation because the fictional world may lead to delusion, even madness. Mr. Freud's personal attitude, if we may believe his poetry, is much the same. He would probably to himself, I am a specimen farmer, teacher, traveler, citizen, poet, and I haven't enough of anything to sell, but I have got a few mountains and valleys inside of me, and a bit of sea to look at rest. I am headed for something somewhere, and I am bound to keep going. About the poem. The poem was published in the Atlantic Monthly in August 1915 and used in his collection Mountain Internal. uh, it is written in iambic tetrameter. It employs an ABAB rhyme scheme in each of its four stanzas. Frost's inspiration for the poem is generally accepted to be his friend and fellow poet Edward Thomas. During the time during the time Frost lived in England, the two would often go for walks led by Thomas. Frost comment about the poem, the importance he always placed on a metaphor and his careful word choices throughout the poem direct us to do so. What's more, as a result of those efforts, the apparent contradiction we initially see disappears. His supposition is that the poet is reflecting on a human tendency to seek and see patterns by which we give meaning and order to our lives. The poems was mistakenly construed to affirm the importance of nonconformist individualism by taking the lesser traveled road. It is new expected to be heard as a poem exposing man's self-deception and tendency to rationalization. Analysis of the poem. The road not taken is simply a poem about individualism, and the poem was published in 1915. Uh, this poem about having taken a road fever have traveled. The poem has remained an enigma. If it is not a poem about roads that are markedly different, then it should not follow that taking one road would be of greater impact than taking the other. Yet that claim is made, and we are left with the question of Frost's intention in presenting us with what appears to be a rather obvious contradiction. The same idea when he argues that the poem is not a salute to can-do individualism, but rather one that parodies the self-deception we practice when constructing the story of our own lives. Frost's attitude toward Thomas' tendency to belabor and regret his choices may have been inspired by the poem. The poem is not limited to or by these circumstances. The road that is not taken is the one the speaker has looked down with such care. There is no indication that he looks down the other road as well. The situation in the first stanza shows the speaker contemplating one road. Frost's poem has less to do with the nature of the actual road we choose, but more with the nature of our relationship to time while considering the very roads we were traveling, what we do with each moment while on the road. The in the road not taken, the choice the speaker makes between stanza 1 and stanza 2 is to focus on the here and now. The meaning of I took the one less traveled would have been sufficient and even more forceful since the spoken stress would have fallen more naturally on the less than it does now on the by. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. In this poem, we can see that there are use of repetitions of the word I. The repetitions of the I makes the whole thing more expressive and heartfelt, and a high tone of poignant enunciation that really makes all the difference. The stops the speaker's forward-looking flow and forces him to come back to himself in that moment to be present. The choice that is made all the difference is the choice to not hurry through the life towards the future, passing by the present without notice, but rather to live in the present moment. I shall be telling this with a sigh somewhere ages and ages hence. The sigh that it begins the final stanza happens in an undefined somewhere, but is a doubly emphasized time. Frost chooses to use the phrase ages and ages, bringing to mind an extremely long period of time. Uh, Born in 1874, 74, Frost was over 40 years old when the road not taken first appeared in print. And although he lived to be 88, the average lifespan of a man in his early 20s at the turn of the century was 61. To add to the sense created in the poem of more than simply years or decades passing, Frost ends the line with the word hence. The word hence here Frost uses hence in definitions in archaic language. Archaic language definition of hence is from this word or from the living. Conclusion: the road not taken had he meant it as a contradiction, a parody about a friend, or a poem on self deception. The poem leads us to what Frost wanted us to understand if we choose to take our time with both our lives and his poetry. Here are the references, and if any have any question, then ask me.
Anjali, what is your view? What is the speaker's attitude towards the choice which he has to make?
The speaker's attitudes towards the choice which he has to make, uh, as I mentioned in my slide, the speaker attitudes towards the choice which he has to make is to attitude which he has to make is ambivalent. It is a complex, it is a complexity.